Republican candidates last Tuesday in the elections, critical race theory served as a useful scapegoat. And now some are asking, how long should schools wait before introducing children to the concept of race and the history of racism in the United States? A recent USA Today poll shows how divided parents are when it comes to teaching about race. When asked about teaching the ongoing effects of slavery and racism, black parents supported the idea with 82%, while white parent support was at little over 50%. But when asked about teaching critical race theory, black parents didn't see any difference between the two questions. However, white parents' support for that idea went down from 52% to only 37%. Joining me to help make sense of all of this is conservative political commentator Greg Foreman. He's the host of the YouTube channel Black Conservative Perspective. Greg, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Let's start with the fundamental question here. Is there a such thing as too early, in your estimation, to teach children about racism?
Well, thank you, Mark, for having me on your show. To answer your question, it really comes down to the parents, right? If parents want to teach their kids about racism at 2, 3 years old, if they want to wait till they're teenagers or they want to have that conversation later on in life, I think that's purely up to the parents. I don't think it's the government's role to be teaching our children about race, especially the way we're talking about it today. I mean, really, to be quite honest with you, I don't think that black people, this is Black News Tonight, so I guess it's mainly about black people. I don't think we really should be concerned about this conversation about race, especially when our 8th graders are reading at a proficiency rate of 15% at or above proficiency rate. So it's like the whole race conversation, in my opinion, is not really that important compared to some bigger issues. And we really shouldn't be wasting classroom time talking about it when I think it's ultimately up to the parents to have that conversation. Anyways, I think we have much bigger issues in the black community to worry about than race.
Should we teach math? Should it be up to the parents to teach math in school?
No, but the difference between math and teaching about race is that math is actually going to help you get a job and make some money. Reading
okay,
is
so we should only teach things in school. So we should only teach things in school that will make you money.
Yes. We need to focus on things
that are
going to help people.
So for example,
yeah, go ahead.
So for example, I think we agree that teaching someone how to count could help them make money. Teaching someone how to read a book could help them make money. Teaching someone who the 3rd president is doesn't teach you how to make money. Letting someone know who won the Battle of Germantown doesn't help you make money. Should we not teach history? Should we not teach the civics process? Should we not teach people about the electoral process just because it doesn't make money?
Well, yeah, everybody should know their basic history. Everybody should know the history of this country, what this country's been through, what we've done. But again, that's not kind of what we're talking about.
Why?
We're not talking about whether or not we should teach history. What we're really talking about here is whether or not we should be having this race conversation that we're having right now, which is essentially trying to teach people that a certain group of people in this country are superior or inferior to other people purely based off their race. I think that conversation is completely unnecessary, it's not productive, and it's a waste of classroom time.
Well, no, just to be clear, two things. One, no one is making the argument that we should be teaching racial superiority in school. That's not to say that no one has ever done that and no one else would, or that no one would like to do that. Who right now, particularly as we're talking about teaching about race and racism, is arguing that we should teach racial superiority in school?
Well, here's the thing. What I'm saying is that it may be anecdotal, but we have seen teachers,
you said some people are. Who?
Teach that things.
You said some people are.
What I'm saying
Who's
is,
making?
what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it may be anecdotal, but I have seen teachers teaching about racial superiority in school, essentially teaching kids that, hey, because you're white, you inherently have certain advantages in life. Because you're black, you don't. And what I'm saying is that is stuff that is being implemented in our school, and for people to keep denying that, that's honestly just making the problem worse, really, for the Democrats and the left, for what you guys claim that you want.
So you're saying that anecdotally you've seen white people arguing white superiority. Okay, let's say that's true.
Well,
surely you don't think that those of us on the you did say maybe you misspoke, but you said maybe you misspoke, but you said there are people who are white who are teaching that because they're white that they're superior. And I'm saying if that's what they're arguing, then surely I would hope you'd want us to challenge that in school and not allow that to be the case. I don't think anyone on the left, anyone who's arguing for critical analysis of history, anyone who's arguing for racial justice is arguing that. No, the argument is quite the opposite. The argument is that we're trying to teach that there is no racial superiority. And as far as teaching history, and I want to give you a chance to respond to this, you're saying that we should teach history. Is it possible to teach the history of the United States and not talk about racism?
Well, here's the thing. Again, it's the way we're talking about it. Nobody has a problem with us talking about the Civil War, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, Civil Rights era. Nobody has an issue with that. It is the way we're framing these issues, and we're essentially trying to make a certain group of people in this country feel like, hey, you're guilty for what your ancestors did in the past, or that a certain group of people are inferior or disadvantaged because of what happened in the past. I don't think that it's conducive to actually helping and solving an issue that you claim that you're trying to solve. I think it's better use of our time to actually focus on teaching kids skills, particularly financial literacy, making sure they can read, math, things that are going to actually help them become, doctors, lawyers, increase their social mobility. And I think that will help solve the so-called problem more than teaching about race. It is quite simply just a waste of time, in my opinion.
Right. I guess, and that feels a bit like a straw man. I mean, we all agree that you should teach skills that are useful for future endeavors in life and for success in the job market and for social mobility. But we both have agreed, I think, and most people would agree, that much of what we teach in school is not about that, right? That school has that function, but then we also teach things to make them better people. We teach things to make people citizens. We teach people to give people what the conservative right, people like Edie Hirsch argued, is cultural literacy, that there are things that all Americans should know. I mean, this is part of the argument. And you're saying, well, we can teach history and we can teach slavery and we can teach the Civil War, but it's the way we teach it. What would be the wrong way to teach about the Civil War? What would be the wrong way? Give me an example. What would be the wrong way?
Well, again, the wrong way to teach about the Civil War is to frame it as if white people are inherently evil, and that because of colonialism, essentially they've dominated the chessboard of the world, and that everybody's life is bad because of white people. That's the wrong way to teach it, and that is the argument that some people are making. I think that it is inaccurate, because I think when you look at the lens of history, there are winners and there are losers, and I feel like some people seem to be more upset about the fact that European colonialism was successful for a certain period of time, rather than actually being upset about so-called racism, because what they are actually really calling for is racism against white people to try to rectify the past.
Who's calling?
That's obviously not the right thing to do. That's obviously not the right. Go ahead. Okay,
so again, there are a few things here, and I'm going to steal just a minute just to make sure we get to all of them, or as much of it as we can. One, you say people are arguing that we should reverse this idea and now call for racism against white people or superiority of black people over white people. And again, maybe there's an individual person doing that. There's always an individual person. There's an individual person right now saying that the moon is made of cheese, right? But in terms of a movement, a curriculum movement, an organization, a group, a homework assignment, can you name any group, any politician, any educator, any scholar who is arguing that we should reverse the course of history and now argue for black racial superiority in school?
Well,
can you name one?
There was a professor. There was a professor at Rutgers University. I don't remember her exact name. You're probably familiar with her. I actually did a video about her. Again, I don't remember her name off the top of my head. That's not what I was prepared to talk about in this interview. But she actually went on the route and did an interview and basically argued for just that, black superiority. Right? She made the argument that indigenous people and black people essentially have been living together in peace and harmony until the evil white man came and destroyed everything. And basically, white people just in the way of black superiority. She made that argument. She's an academic. She's a professor. Again, if anybody wants to go on my channel and watch the video, you can. But there are people out there making those arguments.
Just to be clear,
like they're not. I think it's really hurting you. Go ahead.
So a couple of things. One, I think you're grossly misrepresenting Dr. Brittany Cooper's argument from Rutgers University.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
And let me finish. Please let me finish. I haven't interrupted you. And second, I asked her to name someone who's making an argument about teaching this in school, in K-12 education. Dr. Brittany Cooper does not do K-12 education. She's not talking about curriculum. We were having a conversation about what's being taught to our children in school. Dr. Brittany Cooper, although she's not making the argument that you're suggesting she's making, she's also not talking about schools. There's no organization or no movement making this argument. You're picking to pick an individual professor who did make a point about how white people and to use your language, colonialism has disrupted and interrupted the living conditions and the life and the culture of indigenous people and black people, which I would say is historically accurate. But even if you disagree with that, that's not an argument for what's happening in K-12 education. But you also said, and this is the last piece I wanted to get from you, just so that I can understand here, are you suggesting that colonialism did not, and settler colonialism particularly in the United States, did not disrupt the lives of indigenous people? Would you argue that European conquest didn't disrupt the lives of Africans on the continent? Would you argue that, honestly?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not making that argument. What I'm saying is it's not unique. You're acting like it's unique, that it's inherent to just white people, and that's just not true. And that is the argument that she was making. Also, you asked me to name an academic who was saying those things. I gave you that. We moved on past the whole name a teacher in public school that's making that argument, because I already told you that I've seen anecdotal evidence of teachers doing that. But the real conversation here, Mark, is about this equity.
Let me pause. I want to keep you.
In the implementation
I want to have the equity conversation. I'm not interrupting. Just hold on, brother. I got to take a commercial.
Yeah.
Brother. I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to double this conversation. I want to give you all. I don't want you to feel cut off. So let me take a commercial break. Come back, and we can have a full convo. Everybody, stay with me. We're here on Black News Tonight, talking race, talking education, talking justice. Stay right here. Political commentator Greg Foreman. Greg, we've been talking about this question around race, this question around education. You said there was an issue of equity that we're missing here that you think we should be raising in schools. Tell me what it is.
So the issue is that this idea of equity, in my opinion, I think is toxic in school. I think it's especially toxic to black people because it essentially calls for the dumbing down of education in order to try to right the wrongs of the past, and is also stirring more racial hatred. I think it's riling up a certain group of people in our country because they feel like they're being discriminated against in favor of other people, when I think that's absolutely necessary. So absolutely unnecessary. But again, there's two components of it here. I think it's stirring up a racial divide because essentially you're calling for discrimination against other people and to try to help other people to rectify the past. But you're also implementing school policies that is dumbing down.
Can you explain that
education.
first point to me? I'm not following.
Go ahead.
Can you just explain? Can you explain the first point to me? I just didn't follow. You said how are white people being discriminated against?
Well, essentially what happens is that there are policies that have been implemented in these schools where what you're saying is that, well, we have to take away from white people, right? Because black people are not doing as well. So therefore they need extra help. They need more resources. We have to shift things to a certain group of people simply because, well, we feel like they're not doing as well because of systemic racism. That's just in general what's happening in schools, right?
Can you name one city, one district where resources have been taken from white people and given to black people, where they said white people are going to get less so that we can give black people more because they need it more? Can you name one district in the country where that's happened?
Mark, in general, when we're talking about the whole concept of equity and being implemented in schools, that is the overall concept, is that when we have to do certain things in order to right the wrongs of the past, that means that we have to essentially take from others to give to other people that we feel are not as advantaged. Now, when it comes to the second part of that, is when we're talking about. I'm still not following the first part. Well, Mark, if you want to act like you don't understand the concept of equity, that's on you. That's not on me. What I'm simply saying is that you know as well as I know that.
Forgive me if I'm not being clear. I understand what equity means, and I understand that you're arguing that taking from one group and giving to another is problematic and that it's happening. My question is not what is equity. My question is, let me finish the question. Let me finish the question.
Yeah, go ahead.
My question is, where can you name one place in the United States? Very simple question. Can you name one place in the United States where the thing you're describing is happening?
Okay, let me actually give you an example. There was a professor, I believe it was Berkeley, that talked about how during these social justice riots, they wanted black students to get a higher grade, or they couldn't fail simply because they were hurt by what was going on. But they didn't apply that same standard to white people. So you're not judging people equally. Now, that's not exactly an example of taking from white people per se.
It's not at all.
But it's setting unequal standards in the name of equity. And that's wrong, and is also not good for black people.
So that's an interesting point. You got the university wrong, and also it wasn't that a professor was offering that. It was that the student made a request of the professor to do that. The professor said no.
The student made a request.
Right,
no,
right.
Yes,
So
I got you.
Just because I'm on the news, I have to actually correct and give facts. So your whole argument here is that a white professor at the liberal Berkeley was trying to do something for black students and not whites. That's completely untrue. It was actually a student that made the request, and the professor said, "Let me finish." The professor said no, and it didn't happen, and that's not a K-12 school example. So it's the wrong context, the wrong professor, the wrong story, and the wrong outcome. Can you once again name one place where the thing you said is happening is actually happening? I'll give you the last word.
Mark, listen. Yes, I got some of the details wrong because I'm thinking about this off the top of my head. Yes, the professor said no, but what I'm telling you is that is an example of what happens in schools. It doesn't just apply to just colleges. You know that. You can pretend like it's not, and that's fine. Be my guest. Keep pretending like it's not happening. But that
I'm not pretending. I haven't found it.
Asking for. Well, Mark. Listen. I just gave you an example of somebody asking professors.
No, you didn't.
Now, the professor said no, but there are times when professors do that. Now, can I think about an example?
Like name one.
No, but it
name
happens.
one.
But it happens anytime. Just because you ask me a question, well, name this off the top of your head, bruh. Listen, that doesn't mean it's not happening. You know it's happening. And you can pretend like it's not, but that's to your detriment. So go ahead and keep doing that. We can talk about Virginia, which is what you told me we were talking about. So let's actually talk about that, because these parents are saying that this is happening. And this has led to the Democrats losing that state, right, when they were supposed to basically blow it out, but they lost because essentially what you're saying right now is trying to pretend that these things are not happening, and they are.
Well, to be clear, I wasn't diverting us from Virginia. I was asking you to expound on an example. If I were to say conservatives are jumping liberals in the street and beating them down, you'd say where? Name a city. That wouldn't be an unreasonable request from you. It would be a very smart request from you. And so I was simply asking you to give an example. And you're right. Just because you don't know the example off the top of your head doesn't mean it's not true. But if you don't know any examples off the top of your head, it might be a good reason not to give it as an example. That's all I'm saying. But I'd love to have you back on the show, Greg. You're a great guest. You're a good brother.